Welcome back to the Let's Talk Baseball podcast. I'm your host, Mike Correa, joined by my good friend, Jacob Payne. We're continuing our power rankings at 11. Of course, last time we left off with the Giants at 15, Brewers at 14, Orioles at 13, Rays at 12. Before we get into catching up, as we always do, we have longer episodes, guys. No more 40-minute regular Zoom calls. We're going to be able to do this longer so we can actually go in depth more and really just talk a lot, just overall more about everything. So that's going to be a lot. So, how you doing, Jacob? How's your weekend going?
Doing well, doing well. Dodgers just finished up their Camelback Ranch tour with spring training. We are almost at the beginning of the season. I'm so excited for this season, man. I feel like recently I've been so into baseball, and every year it's just more hype. So I'm super excited to get started, see what we got going. In all of baseball, honestly, I'm very excited to see how these teams perform and how competitive it's going to be at the top of the top for these last few teams that we're going to be ranking.
It's gonna be interesting because obviously this is gonna be your top, the cream of the crop of these teams, and of course there's gonna be a lot of debate whether or not where these teams should go. Like I know for a fact when we get to our 7 through 4, because that's where I have that right now. Those four teams are very interchangeable right now. But based off what has happened in the past few weeks, I think I like that. But we'll get to it when we get to it. But our goal right now is to get Our goal right now is to get to 6, so 11 through 6, so we would get those last two teams in. But starting at 11, of course, we teased it last episode, the Cleveland Guardians. And I'm just gonna say the most uneventful offseason, and I'm just saying they didn't make moves. So they made moves. They made two very good moves, but they just didn't lose a lot of guys, and they didn't sign a lot of guys. They lost Austin Hedges, who's a veteran catcher, Nolan Jones, a Rocky now, Luke Maile, and Owen Miller, and they added two power bats, which is something that they were focusing on getting this offseason, and two pretty good ones at that. Mike Zunino to come up and fill that catching spot, and Josh Ring That Bell. He's going to be taking over at first base DH, sharing that time with Josh Naylor. But looking at this Guardians team, I mean, they surprised us. I mean, I know we talked about this before on the show. I've said that at the trade deadline, I was expecting Shane Bieber or someone to get sold because it looked like that was where they were going. And then they came in and took over the division and dominated. And yes, they got better because they didn't make a lot of moves, but they didn't have to too because like we said, we've mentioned the AL Central, the NL Centrals, they are not competitive in any way, shape, or form right now. And that's gonna help their cause. But again, with the additions of these some other teams, do you think they can easily just swoop in and keep succeeding? Sorry.
Can they? Absolutely. I really like their moves. I think I'll be honest. I haven't paid too much attention to the Guardians in the past few years. The Central teams really just haven't really caught my interest. But watching them in the playoffs, I would say that their big issue was offense. I think that was clear. In the postseason, their pitching staff performed. Their offense did not. Granted, the pitching staff did enough to win a few of those games, but I think when it came down to the Yankees series, if they would have put up a few more runs here and there, even not necessarily just obviously scoring more runs you're going to win the game, but I mean if they would have got more runs earlier on in the games and get the momentum further in their court, they would have had a good shot at winning that series. So I think those additions in Josh Bell and Mike Zunino are great additions. That's a tough loss with Austin Hedges. I know he's a great catcher. I do know that they do have someone already ready to replace him. I think it still is kind of a tough loss losing a veteran catcher, somebody who knows the pitching staff very well, somebody who's very good defensively. But that being said, I think overall they got a little bit better. I don't know if I would say that they are the team to beat in the Central, because I do think it is still a toss up with the White Sox and them being their competitive, non-competitive selves. Um, it really is a toss up, but um I gotta say, I am looking forward to see these Guardians performing at least the way we hope to see them perform. In that they had a lot of good years from a lot of their rookies. Like they were kind of quietly good years on several of their rookie guys that came up and got them to the playoffs. And like you said, I was expecting Shane Bieber to end up somewhere um, during that trade deadline, and to see him stick around, I would say was very surprising. Um, but it's very clear why that happened. They thought that they saw the White Sox kind of petering off, and they thought they had a shot at playoffs, and they did. They shot their shot, and they took it, and they played great. I'm not going to go out there and say that they were the best baseball team in the playoffs, because they weren't, but they played great, especially for the way that their roster was structured. So I think this was a good off season for them. I think they could have gone bigger, but I also think with the amount of money that they spent and with the losses that they took, overall it was a good off season for them.
I agree. And going back to what you said about the rookies, obviously, Oscar Gonzalez, he was a SpongeBob, their postseason hero. Obviously, he did a fantastic job in that postseason. Ended up slugging through 91 games, 296, 327, and 461 as your average OPB in slugging. Steven Kwan, obviously a contact hitter, 6 home runs, 298 average, 373 on base, and 4 to slugging. And Andres Jimenez, we know what he did. He was an all-star, all-star starting second baseman. He had 297, 371, 466, and 17 home runs. So they came up and showed up, and they are going to do that again because I don't think these guys are just going to fall off, especially with the energy in that clubhouse. Because this team is a young group, the youngest team in baseball, and they have so much energy. And it's not even that like arrogant, cocky energy. It's just that family, which is something the other central teams haven't had. That being said, like we said, it's a good offseason, but they didn't really do a lot. Do you think, considering the other team's off seasons, that this wasn't as great as an off season of the Twins or the White Sox?
I think the Guardians did what they felt they needed to do. I think they went into this offseason and said, look, guys, we got a good squad. I know it's not a very flashy squad, and it's not the best squad out there, but we've got a squad that can put together a decent season, hover around that 500 ball mark, and take the Central again. And I think right now, I think they did exactly what they needed to do. Like I said, I think their big issue was power, and they didn't have that going into the offseason. So what did they target? They targeted power. They got Josh Bell. They got their guy. He's probably going to be the DH for them. So DH or first base. We'll see. Um, but that's what they needed. And right now, I'm not convinced that any of the other Central teams really targeted their flaws and are making a good case for being competitive this year. And so for the Guardians, I think this was a great offseason because they didn't have to spend so much money to get basically, ideally, exactly what they got last season. Good season, near 500 ball, make a playoff spot, make some waves, cause some chaos. That's what they did. I think they can do it again this year. It obviously is contingent on their rookies performing again, because like you said, I didn't realize they had those great averages, Quan and Andres Jimenez, right? Um, at hovering around 300 average, that's incredible. So if they can perform like that again, with a little bit more power this season, more power to the Guardians, man. Doing what they can do, if they can basically get exactly what they did last season or more off of how little they spent this offseason, that's a win. And then they can pony up on that and then either spend more money on their own guys and extending them, or getting some bigger free agents within this next season and convincing free agents, hey, look what we just did in the past 2 seasons with almost nothing. Guess what we could do with you on our side. So I really think this is a power move from the Guardians, and I think if it all works out the way they think it will, it's going to set them up real well for the next few years.
I agree. This team did not have any holes. If and yeah, they didn't have a lot, if any, holes on this roster, is going back and looking at it. And because of that, the reason because of that was the rookies showing up. Like we said, you would not expect all three of these guys to come out and perform the way they did, whether it was playoffs or the regular season, and they did that. And I do agree that their success most likely is going to rely that their only main issue, their only question is, can these rookies do it again? I think they can, because like we said, they're not in a competitive division. They did make the smart moves this offseason and not just fillers throughout the roster like other teams might have did. But that being said, I think another question, not question, is just, once again, I think you need that starting pitching rotation to be the same as it was. You can't have any cracks. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to crack, because you still have Shane Bieber, Tristan McKenzie, Kyle Crontra, Aaron Savale, and Zach Plesac, who are all guys and all can do it. But if one of those guys slip up, I think that's where we could potentially see the White Sox and the Twins come into play. But that being said, their over-under currently is at 87 wins, and they won, I think they were 90 and 72 last year. Let me just double check. Yes, they were they were 92 and 70. What's your take?
I'm actually a little surprised at the over under. I would have guessed that because of their off season that Fangraphs would have had um their over under a little bit lower, just because it wasn't a very flashy off season. I'm gonna take the over, and I'm not gonna. I think it's not gonna be by much, but I do think they're gonna get around 88, 89, maybe up into the 90 win category. Actually, I didn't realize they got 92 wins that last season. That's impressive. Um, yeah, I like I said, I think this is a good Guardian squad. Um, we've talked about it before. A couple of these teams aren't as flashy as some other teams. You know, they aren't spending $500 billion. Um, but they they're getting the job done. They're doing what they need to do to make some waves. And I'm telling you, especially, I didn't even touch on their starting rotation with Shane Bieber, the likes of Shane Bieber, McKenzie and Quantrill. Those are some throwers. Those are some shovers, man. Um, they got some arms. So like I said, during the postseason, that was not the issue. Their pitchers were excellent. Their relief was excellent in the postseason as well. Um, it was just a matter of those of sparking something on the offensive side and getting some runs in. So let's hope that the Guardians can play well. I want to see them do well. I want to see them perform. I want to at least see them win the Central, because I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of some of these other teams. I know there's guys on the teams that I like, but just the GMs of the other teams and the way that they've structured their teams and stuff, I feel like some of these Central teams are really dropping the ball. So I'd love to see the Guardians win.
I agree. I mean, yes, the pitching rotation is going to be great. Unfortunately, they all have. I mean, the first predictions aren't always going to be 100%, but they're back into the rotation. Aaron Savale is predicted for a 4.20 ERA. Kyle Contra is predicted for a 4.35, and Plesac for a 4.49, which actually really surprised me. And hopefully that's not the way it goes. But even if you're going to have those guys give you great numbers, and it's not like you don't have the bullpen to back it up, because they do, and they have a sneaky bullpen, one of the better bullpens in baseball, by far. So that's also a reason I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna take the over with you. I'm gonna take that ride that Cleveland train. I feel like a little bit. I think there is a team that can really surprise us. I mean, not in the sense that they're gonna win the division, but what they can do in the playoffs, because they showed they had that energy last year. Whether it was the walk off against the Rays or the walk off against the Yankees, but which they did. They walked it off twice. They came back. So, and I think if they just keep that momentum rolling, they can easily go on to the CS, maybe even a World Series. But that's, again, you're gonna have to face some of these better teams on this list. Number 10, we are in the top 10. Congrats to those who make it from this point out. Congrats to those who have made the playoffs and the Guardians of the Rays. And in the 10th spot, we have the St. Louis Cardinals, the franchise of franchises. And they lost some guys this offseason. Not a lot of guys, but some guys. They lost Corey Dickerson, he actually put up some surprising numbers. I was looking at his Fangraphs page. I was like, okay, he actually put up a decent season. Alex Reyes, of course, was injured most of the year, and Jose Quintana, who was just amazing for them, lights out in the second half. He's now a New York Met. Obviously, that's gonna time later. He's shut down for at least 3 months with his injury, so hopefully he recovers. But their two main losses this offseason because they retired are Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina. I got to give it up for them. A great career. Wherever they went, they're gonna most likely 99% sure be Hall of Famers. And they didn't do a lot of They added two major moves. Anthony Mezhowitz, if I said that wrong, sorry, from the Royals, a lefty that they added the bullpen, and of course their new franchise catcher in Wilson Contreras, who was the All-Star starting catcher last year, is great offensively, is great defensively, and he is willing to work with their pen. And I think that it's a really good move for them. Not as to replace the catcher, because their catcher was a bit of a question. Because they didn't really have a full catcher. Okay, it was gonna be Andrew Knizner. I mean, not to know this to him, but he's not your Wilson Contreras, Yadier Molina type. And Wilson Contreras just came in and was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And he did it. He signed for 5 years. I think there's an option for 6 years. I'm not 100% sure, but he is going to be so great for them. I'm just imagining. Oh, and they have just the likes of Nolan Arenado, who was third in MVP voting, and Paul Goldschmidt, who was the MVP. And of course Lars Nootbaar. Nootbaar had an amazing WBC. Gained like 500,000 followers on Instagram. He's become an international superstar now. But this team, kind of like the Guardians, they're not a flashy team, but they're gonna get the job done, and they're gonna bring it out. Because again, a not competitive division. I mean, yeah, you're gonna have those two teams like the Twins and the White Sox hanging around, and here you're gonna have the teams like the Brewers or maybe even the Cubs hanging around. There's that trying to fight that. But where I'm a little concerned about this team does fall to the pitcher, because as we know, Wainwright went down for a little bit with that injury. They just extended Michaelis, but still, you're banking on Flaherty coming back, Montgomery and Michaelis still pulling it up, Steven Matz to do something finally, and Matt Liberatore to pull it out and have a breakout year, which I think, in my opinion, it might be a little bit too much to ask. What do you think?
Well, I want to start with touching on two of the best baseball players we've seen growing up in Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina. Absolute first ballot Hall of Famers, no question. If there is a lunatic on the voting block that votes that Albert Pujols or Yadier Molina does not make it first ballot Hall of Fame, they're simply wrong and should be fired from their job. It's just they for what they've done for the game of baseball over their careers. I mean, the Machine is his nickname is the Machine for a reason. Like, the dude was an absolute machine. There's no understating how good he was at the height of his baseball career. And Yadier Molina, I would say arguably one of the best catchers ever to play the game. You simply couldn't steal off that dude. And I would say probably even if the bases were bigger, during Yadier Molina's reign, it wouldn't be close. He still wouldn't make it close. I think he's leading I was watching a stat on John Boy. The amount of strike him out, throw him out, double plays, and I think like ever, and I think Yadier Molina has double that of anyone else. These two guys are just absolute studs, and I cannot wait for the day, because I know that day is going to come. It's a matter of when both of their jerseys get retired for the St. Louis Cardinals, because that's going to be a special day for Cardinals fans. In fact, last season must have been just an amazing season to be a Cardinals fan, to see the whole trio of Pujols, Molina, and why can't I think of his last name? Wainwright. That's right. Jeez, shame on me. Seeing that trio reunite and play at a great pace, like they all did well. I mean, to be fair, I don't think Yadier Molina bat that well, but Wayno was great and still still shoving well. Um, Pujols, he did it, man. He reached the home run the home run record
700
that he wanted to, right? And he did that at Dodger
at Dodger
Stadium.
Stadium. I was
That was so
so
great.
happy.
2 home runs in the game, like that.
That was beautiful.
That was such a
I'm
great
not
game to
sure.
watch, and I was so happy that everybody there was cheering for him because that was such a wholesome moment, dude.
It was actually the our homecoming game. I was like looking at updates at the on my phone. I was like, okay, he hit one home run. It's crazy. And we had like this little group of all of our friends just watching the game during halftime. And he hit the 700th home run, and we all went crazy. It was awesome. It was just a beautiful moment.
Yeah, I mean, I know we didn't have Pujols for long, but man, dude, he's such a lovable guy. He's that type of dude where there's no one in the world who has a reason to be like hate him or dislike him even. He's just such a lovable guy. He's always smiling, always having fun, competitive, great at the game. Like it's just he's such a great guy, and I'm so glad that he was on the Dodgers even for the small amount of time that he was because he did a lot for the roster. He did a lot for the team. He even performed well too, so that's just great. So now I'm done talking about the greats of the game. I've rambled on a little bit about them too long. The Cardinals, great team, stellar team. They did lose a couple of big pieces, obviously. Pujols and Molina, what they meant to the franchise, what they meant to the team as a whole. Even if you take out the contributions that they made, offensively and defensively, the mentality that they brought, it's almost like having extra coaches on the team just to keep your teammates grounded and everything. I can't imagine what they did for that roster. So losing them, those are big losses. Jose Quintana, I've been following him since he was around since he was a stud pitcher with the Pirates. The dude's a monster, man. He's great. He's an underrated pitcher. Um that's a big loss for them, especially with a starting rotation that we're looking at with the Cardinals that is kind of iffy at best. Especially with Wayno in his age, he's guaranteed to not be healthy the entire season, and that is not even considering the stint that he's gonna have, um, uh, this preseason and going into the beginning of the season. So that's a tough loss. The gains though, the Wilson Contreras was perfect. That is a perfect fit for the Cardinals. The Cardinals are known and have been known for the past forever now, on having a great defensive catchers and for teams not being able to steal off the Cardinals. And after Yadier Molina leaving, that was like, okay, maybe that's going to change. Not after bringing in Wilson Contreras. I know nobody can fill Molina's shoes, but Contreras can get damn close. That's for sure. That is a great pickup, and offensively, he's a solid offensive pickup for in terms of offensive catchers. So that is great. They didn't do too much in this offseason, in terms of additions. So I am still a little concerned about their pitching. Um, and their bullpen. But I gotta say, this roster, at least the lineup, the main meat of this roster, that is the infield, outfield, and defense in general, is a great roster to build off of. I think the main question is obviously the pitching that we touched on, but the depth. If Goldschmidt gets injured, if Arenado gets injured, if Lars Nootbaar gets injured, if somebody gets injured, who's going to replace these guys? Because I haven't really seen too much from their rookies. Now, granted, I'm not a Cardinals fan, and I'm not going to pretend like I've watched every single game, but there's not a lot of names that I've heard constantly of like these rookies where, hey, if this guy goes out, somebody's there to fill his shoes. So that's where I would question this team is in terms of depth. But it's a team that have loved to hate to see because I'm a Dodgers fan and we always see them in the postseason and it almost never goes well. So we've gotten to know the Cardinals very well and we've gotten to know these guys. Paul Goldschmidt is just a menace to society and any team he ever plays. Um, Miles Mikolas is a great starting pitcher. Um, it's just a matter of health for him, and same goes for Wainwright. So we'll see with these Cardinals. But they're a good team, man. They're a great team. It's really going to depend on health of their entire team. That goes for um field position players and pitchers as well.
I agree with you there, but I'm gonna bounce off your point about not having that much depth there, and I agree because I'm gonna say this one name in a second, but that one name, that one big prospect that's gonna supposedly shock the world this year, obviously, in Jordan Walker is supposed to be their starting left fielder. He's not gonna be that depth piece for them. So if he goes out too, where that I mean, obviously right now they have Dylan Carlson on the bench, but he's rumored to be traded soon. So you never know. But I do think this team is gonna do well, and I think that again, it's gonna rely on the health of this pitching staff because they're old, like you said. And Jordan Walker, I think Walker is a huge part of their success because if one of these guys goes down, whether it is at third, because he can play third base, first base, and the outfield, and if any of those guys go down, he has to step into that spot, and he's gonna have to just take the reins, and maybe he can do that. I'm not saying he can't, but right now his Fangraph stats aren't the greatest. I mean, granted, it's his rookie year, but the way people have been talking about him, they've talked about him like he's the next generational talent. And so his Fangraphs predictions right now, of course, they're predictions. His slash line of average OPB and slugging are 243, 302, and 387, which is not really what you want, especially coming from one of the top prospects in baseball. Granted, 14 homers, but you never know because rookies are some of the hardest things to judge when they're coming up because you never know how they're going to perform. Which is why in my over under, the Cardinals are 88 and a half. I think they're gonna. I want them to get the 90 because I love this team as who they are, and I think they're most likely gonna go over. But something inside of me is just telling me that I have to take this under. I don't know why. And I'm not saying they're not a good team because they're most likely I'm gonna be wrong and they're gonna go over. I think that's just what's gonna happen. But something inside of me is just not letting me take this over. I think this health of this pitching staff is going to be very questionable, and I think that's what's going to bring them down a peg. I think they're still going to win the division because they're a really fantastic team, but I'm going to go with the under on this one.
Yeah, that's a good line. I would have put them right around 87, 88 as well. I'm gonna go with the over. I'm gonna go with the over, and I'm gonna say I would say the reason I'm picking the over is because I have faith that they are going to be a consistent team. They're gonna have injuries like everybody else. They're gonna take injuries to their pitching staff. They're gonna take injuries to their position players. It's gonna happen. But I I really believe in this Cardinals team. I think they're a great roster. And again, the only reason I say I don't like them is because I'm a Dodgers fan and we see them all the time and they play us very, very well. But I think they're a good team. I think it is going to be contingent on health, but I think they're going to be healthy enough to dominate the Central like they have been, um, and get maybe a touch over that 88.5 wins, maybe 89, maybe 90, 91, but right in that area. That's what I foresee.
Going to our ninth ranked team, and Jacob, you're going to have to sell me on this a little bit because some of their moves are making me question how I feel about this team. The Toronto Blue Jays, because don't get me wrong, they added big. I think their pitching got infinitely better, which is going to help them a lot. But their offensive pieces that they brought in and they lost are making me question what can I really hope from this team. And I feel like I feel wrong for saying that because I love this Blue Jays team, but I don't know. I mean, you lose guys like Teoscar Hernandez, Soto Scoria Jr., Ross Stripling, and some minor pieces in Raimel Tapia, Bradley Zimmer, Julian Merriweather, Jackie Bradley Jr. But you lose top prospect Gabriel Moreno because you're catching. Of course, that's not really a big blow because you have Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk, who are obviously studs. And who they brought in, like we said, they mentioned, like I mentioned, they brought in some pitching help. Chris Bassett on a 3-year deal. I love that move for them because it rounds out their rotation in a beautiful way. They had Chad Green, Eric Swanson, and Zach Thompson to round out that pitching depth in the bullpen. And also in the bullpen, our guy Mitch White. It looks like he might make the opening day roster. Good for him. And of course, the bats they added: Kevin Kiermaier to take over center, Brandon Belt to split some DH first base time, and Dalton Varsho, who's going over and is going to be their new lefty bat. So all of these offensive moves lefty. And I know that what they're going for was this lefty bats because they had like none, absolutely zero lefty bats last season. And I like these lefty bats. But I like the righties that they lost in Teoscar Hernandez and Leury Gurriel just a little bit more. Because they had that and they were there and they had that firepower. And I feel like, don't get me wrong, Dalton Varsho is going to have a great season, but Kevin Kiermaier has never been the most offensive piece for the Rays. And Brandon Belt is still getting up there in age. So I need you to sell me. Even if you don't want it, but I might need you to sell me a little bit on if they truly got better.
Well, so like you were talking about, big losses, Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel. I think Ramiel Tapia is actually a bigger loss than maybe some people think. Ross Stripling, great pitcher. We know it firsthand. He might not have had the stats that he wanted to in Toronto, but you gotta let guys settle in their environment. They gotta get to know the team. They gotta get to know the ballpark. They gotta get to know the catchers. There's a lot more to it than just going in and saying, okay, you pitched a dominant season for the Dodgers here as a starting pitcher. You should be able to convert that directly anywhere else. It's just not how it happens. So I think they should have banked on him a little bit more, give him another year, but that's besides the point. Great additions. Kevin Kiermaier, great. A little bit of an arrogant dude, but good nonetheless. Chris Bassett is a solid addition to this pitching rotation. I need you to listen to this pitching rotation. Alek Manoah, Kevin Gausman, Jose Barrios, Chris Bassett, UCL Kikuchi, and Hyunjin Ryu. Damn! I mean, come on, dude. That is a sick rotation. That is one of the best rotations in baseball, and they are completely underrated because they didn't perform so well last year. And don't get me wrong, and when I say didn't perform so well, I mean didn't perform to the standard that these guys perform at. Hyunjin Ryu should have won the Cy Young with the Dodgers. I
Dude,
mean, he's a
I
Cy Young
was
caliber pitcher.
I was there for his perfect game no hit bid in 2019, and I was just so upset. Don't get me wrong, Judge DeGrom had an amazing year, but Ryu deserved it more, and it hurts me that happened.
Absolutely.
That hurt
And
me.
and he is the sixth arm in that rotation. Come on. You got Chris Bassett, is a stud. He's a stud and he's gonna make waves there. At least he should. Jose Barrios, he did not get very comfortable last year, but we know how dominant that dude can be. Kevin Gausman was a menace. Was a menace for the Giants. I don't even know why they allowed him to leave. That was a tough loss for the Giants, and so when he gets going, he's going to be stellar too. And Alek Manoah to lead that class of pitchers, I mean seriously, if this pitching staff hits stride when they need to, having Ryu as like a sixth man kind of bounce in, bounce out whenever they need an extra day of rest or a long reliever, that they are arguably one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. And I would argue that they are the best pitching staff in the AL, alongside of obviously the Rangers and the Yankees. Um, but I mean, like the pitching is not an issue. The bullpen is a little bit more of a question, but even still, a couple of these guys, Yimi Garcia, Adam Simber, they've got some good arms in the bullpen. It's not too terrible. And see, here's the big question, right? Why get rid of Teoscar Hernandez? You know, Stud, absolute stud, right? Middle infield. I think he was playing shortstop for them. But
Yasir was the right fielder. Boba Fett's there.
okay, all right.
Oh, sorry.
Um, but if you look at the guys that they have to back this team up, I mean, now listen to this outfield, okay? Because you can throw any of these three guys anywhere you want in the outfield. You're gonna be okay. Kevin Kiermaier, George Springer, Whit Merrifield. Defensively, you're not gonna get much better than that. Offensively, if these guys are hitting, these guys are hitting. Okay. And then an infield with again, you can slot in with Merrifield wherever you desire, but you got Santiago Espinal, who has really started to make waves here. And Bo Bichette. This guy is an absolute stud muffin that has just blown up the charts over the past few years. So I'm telling you, man, this is a sick roster, and I don't think they really needed to do too much in the offseason to convince people that. Adding to their starting rotation only makes them more deadly. I know they lost a couple of big bats, but I'm not seeing any holes here. Minus maybe you can argue that um the bullpen isn't the best, but with a starting six that is as sick as they are, if they even come close to their full potential, you're not even gonna need a bullpen. You need like two guys towards the end to fill in 7, 8, and 9. That's it. That's all you're gonna need. Realistically, I mean, again, this is if they perform to um the ability that they can. And I didn't even touch on Dalton Varsho. I didn't even add that they made a great depth trade in Dalton Varsho. That is a great depth piece. That is a great guy to say, hey, we need somebody in the outfield. Our one of our guys needs a day off or is injured. Let's just slot in Dalton Varsho. I mean, it's a solid roster when you consider the additions that they made. Because Brandon Belt, I think he's a great guy to slot in here. If anything, again, not even talking about offensive contributions, simply a leader. He's a leader. He was the captain of the Giants. How do you get rid of your captain, by the way? But whatever. He's a leader. He's a leader at heart, and so to lead this team and get them all on board and all pull in the same direction, this is gonna be a squad to contend with the likes of the best squads in all of baseball. And I know we have them down at 9, but I think the biggest reason they're at 9 is because of the lack of depth. But I mean, this is a sick roster.
Yeah, if I'm being honest with you, I haven't really considered their entire team. I'm looking at like a projection of now, like what their team looks like, rotation, bullpen, lineup, bench. Besides the bench, I underestimate. I kind of caught myself, shot myself in the foot here with what I said earlier. But I'm liking this team a lot, and I think, like you said, I think totally forgot they had Whit Merrifield. If I'm being 100% honest with you. I thought he was still a free. I thought he was a free agent, but that's my bad. But they got some guys. I mean, Bo Bichette was the hottest player in September, who is gonna keep it up. Vladdy Jr., of course, he may or may not be one of our picks for MVP this year. Mine, but it's gonna be good. Danny Jansen is actually looking to get more of the time at catcher to give Kirk that DH spot. Matt Chapman, obviously, it's his contract year, so he's gonna come out and have a good year. I feel like for him, and that's gonna be interesting to see what they do with him. The over under is at for them is at 91.5. I'm surprised not by this, not because they're a bad team, because they're a really amazing team, but by the fact that the Orioles got better, and even the Red Sox got better, arguably, and they still have the Rays to contend within that division. I'm gonna go with a slight over because I still think on paper the Yankees should be better than them. Granted, we all know about their 3 now starting pitchers that are injured to start the season, but on paper, The Blue Jays team is going to be good. Can they be good enough to beat the Yankees? Yes. But that depends, I think, on their depth, which is something they do not have a lot of.
Yeah, I would say that that line is mainly because they are in such a tough division. But I am going to be blissfully optimistic for this team and say that they are going to go heavily over. Okay? And I'm going to say this right now. I think the Blue Jays are going to win the division this year. I think they are. Okay? Because
Whoa!
listen to me. The only reason they did not win the division last year, and the only reason they bottomed out of the playoffs, is because their pitching staff was not at 100%. Going into this season, they have 6 stellar starters that, if they are even remotely healthy, since they have a 6th, they should be dominant. And moreover, a lot of these guys getting in their second, third year in Toronto, they're going to get more comfortable with the team. They're going to get more comfortable with the stadium. They're going to get more comfortable in general. I really think we're going to see some sick numbers from Kevin Gausman and Jose Barrios, and we're going to see a nasty, nasty trio with those two and Alek Manoah.
Wow, that's I did not expect that, Jacob. Okay, I see you. Oh, that's okay. I like that. I like that. And I'm gonna take you up one a notch on that with our next team, our eighth ranked team, because no one has in the past few years, besides this team, really, in the last 2 years, has given the Astros a run for their money. I seriously think, in my opinion, the Mariners can come in and take this division. They are our eighth ranked team. They did lose some guys, obviously Eric Swanson, Jesse Winker, Abraham Turo, Kurt Casale, Matthew Boyd, Adam Frazier, Carlos Santana, Mitch Haniger, and Kyle Lewis. He was the guy. But they added Jacob. And oh boy, did they add. Oh, remember Teoscar Hernandez? He's here now. Cooper Hummel as a depth piece. Colton Wong, always a slugger. Trevor Gott, Justin Topa to help out the bullpen. Tommy LaStella, Cole Calhoun, some depth pieces. And our guy, AJ Pollock, he's going to look to get some left field, split at DH time. But boy, do I love this Mariners team. I'm just going to say it right now to start it. The Mariners over-under is 87.5. Oh, that surprised me. That hurt me a little bit. I'm going way over like you did with the Blue Jays. This team still has a rotation you wouldn't think is that flashy, but no. They have, let me tell you about this rotation, Jacob. They have Luis Castillo, who they casually signed to a 5-year extension after they traded for him. They have Robbie Ray, who is 2 years removed from a Cy Young. They have Logan Gilbert, Marco Gonzalez, and George Kirby, who are guys. And if you look at this lineup, you have just so many guys who aren't gonna falter. I feel like you can count on them. You have J.P. Crawford, Colton Wong, Ty France, Eugenio Suarez, Kyle Raleigh, Big Dumper, my guy. I just don't feel like we can expect nothing but either a division title or a one game out of the division from this team. I think that if they don't, sorry about those technical difficulties. We're back. Mike was having a little bit of a freak out, but I just love this Mariners team, Jacob, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I was sold on the Cinderella story of the Mariners as of last year. They're this is a sick lineup again, like we are just talking about. And now this one, I would argue, isn't as flashy as the Blue Jays roster, but what this roster has is like this undoubted, like, you can feel how much of a family, how much of a team these guys are, and you can feel how committed and willing to go to the end of the world to see their team win that this fan base has. That was proven to me like deadly obvious during the playoffs. And like you said, this rotation is real nice with Luis Castillo and Robbie Ray leading the charge. I know Robbie Ray didn't have the postseason that he really wanted to. Real brutal postseason, if I might add. But assuming he can recover and put that past him and not let it bother him, he's one of the most dominant pitchers we've had in the past few years. Logan Gilbert, sneaky good. Sneaky, in fact, a sneaky great season last year. George Kirby really showed up in the postseason when needed. Okay, and this bullpen, man, saved them on several occasions. Andres Munoz is a menace, and I'll be honest, I don't think I hear him talked about enough in the game. I mean, he was absolutely dominant when he came out. Absolutely dominant. Him, Seawald, Castillo did great. I'm just trying to think of the names that I remember like did super well in the postseason. This pitching staff really I think carried the brunt of the workload during the postseason. And what I love about this team, what I love about the Mariners right now is that they have depth. They have depth. We haven't seen that in a lot of the rosters. They have depth. They have depth at every position. Every position, you have at least two guys that can fill the spot. And for the outfield, they've got like 6 candidates who could play any fielding position in the outfield. That is a great place to be. You want to be in a place where you have to struggle to see, okay, who should I be playing right now? Who's hot? Versus, man, my dude just went out. Now I have nobody to rely on. And that outfield is being led by the rookie of the year himself, Julio Rodriguez. That guy is, I mean, he's something else, dude. Like watching him in the home run derby, that gave me chills watching it, man. That was incredible. So I cannot wait to see what is in store for him in his career. And I would love to see another generational talent be a franchise guy for the Mariners, kind of like what we saw with Ichiro Suzuki and being there like just with the team basically his entire professional career. Um, I love seeing those from time to time. Those franchise guys where you think of them and you think Albert Pujols, the Cardinals, you know, Justin Turner, the Dodgers, or Clayton Kershaw, the Dodgers. Um, uh, and like I brought up before, Ichiro Suzuki and the Mariners. Like that's just you love those guys. You love the stories behind them. You tell your children those stories. You tell them about the time that you saw him hit his first home run and the time that you saw him hit his last home run. Like those are what make baseball so romantic, and so I would love to see that be the case for Julio Rodriguez, with a fan base that absolutely adores him. I mean, just absolutely adores him. I know a couple of Mariners fans, and all they ever talk about is Julio Rodriguez and the fact that that kid is just such a stud. And honestly, they talk about this entire roster. This entire roster is just it's such an underrated roster going into this last season, they were not a team you talked about. They weren't the worst of the worst, but they weren't the best of the best. It was one of those mid teams that you just didn't talk about. And they sure as hell made their presence known. They did. And it's a really great time to be a Mariners fan right now because they're hitting their stride. And this is coming at a perfect time because the Astros, I would argue, they're higher on this list, so I'm not going to get into that. But they are declining in power, in my opinion. They're losing some big pieces here and there, and they aren't as dominant as they were, a few years ago. Maybe that's because they're not sign stealing anymore, but whatever. So this is a great time to be a Mariners fan, and I would love to see this Seattle Mariners outperform the Astros in a 162 game season and win the division. And I'm really hoping that is the case this year.
I agree. We're gonna stop this. Not this, but after this next team, it's gonna start. I said 4 through 7. Get ready, because this might be a little shocking you. But we're gonna cut this off at 7. We'll do 6 through 1 on our next episode and the power rankings. But these 4 teams, I think, are interchangeable, because these 4 teams, there's the 3 teams above them, obviously had amazing off seasons, and are going to prove that they're gonna win the division easily. 4 through 7, you could toss up these spots and roll the dice, and they could go out and perform and get these spots. And these 4 teams that I'm talking about are the Dodgers, Padres, Phillies, and Braves. And yes, the Braves have been the division winners for the past couple of years, and they've been performing. And same thing with the Dodgers. But these guys, these guys that are coming up, and the Padres and the Phillies are giving them runs for their money. And I think, not just to be biased, but I do think, I hope you can agree that the Dodgers are going to have this slight advantage, and we'll get into that when we get to power rank them. So this goes to my question: who's the best team in your opinion? Because I have my answer of the 3: the Braves, Padres, and Phillies.
You know what? I have to say the Phillies.
Yes.
I have to say the Phillies, and I have to say that because they not only performed last year, but they got exponentially better in the addition of the king himself, Trey Turner.
Captain America. What a WBC.
I will say Trey Turner is very streaky, and he hit a hot streak during the World Baseball Classic, and we'll probably see him hit a cold streak relatively soon, since he hit his hot streak before the season started, obviously. But dude, the Phillies, they've got a lot of power with their team. And we'll get into them later on, but I do think that the Braves are the last place team of those 3 teams. And I would say the main reason for that is their pitching depth. They have 4 outstanding pitchers currently in Max Fried, Charlie Morton, Kyle Wright, and Spencer Strider. Those last 2 names you might not have heard too much. That's because they're newer guys, but they have really proven themselves. In fact, I've heard of Kyle Wright the least, and I would argue he had one of the best seasons of all those guys.
Casual 20 wins last year.
He performed. He showed up. In fact, I think it was good for him to have that, not have the spotlight, as opposed to like Spencer Strider, because he was able to kind of be a sneaky good arm. But the list stops there, Michael, because I'm looking at this depth chart, and there's no one else listed in the pitching rotation, in the starting pitching rotation, at least as of yet. Now, there will be an addition at some point within the next few days, because we will see somebody stepping up to that spot. Somebody's got to. You can't go on a 4-man rotation unless you want to be like the Dodgers and do 1 million bullpen games a season. That's not ever fun. We don't like seeing that.
Don't. That was a horror.
Don't wear your bullpen out like that, guys. Take our advice. But that being said, they do have a good bullpen. They've got a great bullpen. And they've got a solid roster. They really do. In fact, they have had for the past couple of years, and I'll be honest, I've never really been sold on the Braves. Every year, I think they're not going to play very well. And every year, they show up, and they play very well. And so we'll see what happens this season, but I would say my big question mark for this team is what's going to happen with the rotation. And it's paramount that they find a 5th starter, because if they don't, and they have to worry about bullpen games or long relievers or stuff like that, and then you throw in an injury to one of these big 4, that is gonna be a real brutal hit to the Braves.
I agree. I agree with one with putting him at 7 and your concern. I mean, obviously they've had these guys that are going to perform and they're going to perform again, but that fourth and for that fifth spot is going to be a question. They've announced that as of right now it's going to be Jared Schuster, but I was really surprised because I don't know if you remember, but a little guy by the name of Mike Soroka was going to be there. He was having a pretty decent spring training and they optioned him down because they were like, let's give Jared Schuster a shot. So I think that could be either a big bust or it could be a big, he might get their paycheck. He might get his paycheck as the Braves do with young stars, but that he could easily be called up in Soroka. Let's say Schuster doesn't plan out. He can easily come up and he can easily struggle, which could be a problem for this team. Another problem for this team was their shortstop. They lost Dansby Swanson. They lose guys who they lost. Adam Duvall, Luke Jackson, Darren O'Day, Robbie Grossman, Jake Odorizzi, Kenley Jansen, Manny Pena, Kyle Muller, Freddie Tarnick, William Contreras, and of course, Dansby Swanson. Now, they did add Jacob. They added a lot of bullpen help, even though they did not need to because they're one of the best bullpens in the game. They added Sean Murphy, even though they had the all-star catcher last year in Travis d'Arnaud. This team just doesn't stop making just the smartest moves in baseball. And I'm so envious of them for it because they have such a good GM. Granted, we have a great front office too has been able to do some things, but the things that the Alex Anthopoulos are doing just don't even get me started. But a question of that was shortstop. Can Vaughn Grissom come out and pull the stops? And they were going to say yes. That looks like that was going to happen, but he was optioned to AAA. And Orlando Arcia is going to take a spot. Don't get me wrong. I've loved Orlando Arcia. I've loved his swing even from in 2018 when we were facing him against the Brewers. But it's his first reign to take the full 162, I think, as shortstop. And you never know how that's going to happen. You can't 100% count on these players. I mean, we're a lot of like same thing for us. Dodger fans were looking forward to Gavin Lux, but we didn't know 100% what was going to happen. And there are some other questions on this roster. Marcell Ozuna, he's a very questionable guy just in general with the stuff he's done, but he's still their DH. And Eddie Rosario, he's up there in age. Obviously, had a pretty nice WBC for himself to go out there. But even guys like Ronald Acuna Jr., he's expected to have a big season. But Michael Harris, too, he's expected to have a huge regression, which is making me put this team at 7. Granted, they can easily go out there and go out and win 101 games again because they're the Braves and that's what they do. But I just think I like the Phillies offseason more to the point that I think if all goes right for them, they can surpass the Braves. The Braves over-under is at 95 games, and I'm going under. And I feel bad because I love this team. I love these guys. I love Big Thick Austin Riley. I love Ronnie Acuna. I love Matt Olson, Ozzy Albies, and I love their guys in the pen. Wouldn't mind Max Fried coming over to LA in a couple years, but it's just I just don't see them being as dominant as they were in the past.
Yeah, I didn't really touch on their losses. It's a couple of big losses. William Contreras, big loss. Dansby Swanson, big loss. Adam Duvall, big loss. Um, Kenley Jansen, I know he didn't put up the numbers that he really dreamed of with the Braves, but still a great closer. It's tough to get behind this roster when they have two division mates who are going out and doing everything that they can to make big, big, monstrous additions this free agency. Now, granted, we are gonna see a relatively similar Braves team just about every year for the next 7 years. I think it's at least 7 years because of all the extensions that they've had. Great extensions, might I add, because some of these guys, Spencer Strider, Michael Harris, you got Acuna Jr. out there. Like these dudes, they're getting the bank. Austin Riley, they are getting the bag. And they deserve it. And we are going to be seeing these guys lead this Braves team for quite a long time. And I really thought Freddie Freeman would be leading that team as well. and then they lost him with that whole debacle that we don't even need to get into right now. But I really thought I think personally I know geez, what's his name? Olson?
Yeah, Matt Olson. Yeah, you
Matt
got it right.
Olson. I'm not saying he didn't perform because he absolutely did. He did exactly what he needed to and more. Um, but they've had a lot of big losses, a lot of tough losses in the last couple of years, and I don't think their additions really outweighed the losses that they've had in these last couple of years, especially this offseason. I don't think the additions that they made will have as much of an impact as the losses to them did because Duvall, Contreras, and Swanson, they all had a huge, huge impact to this team and just being great pieces for them. And the guys that they picked up, don't get me wrong, great depth pieces. Outstanding. But that being said, we're not gonna get a Dansby Swanson year from Arcia. At least I don't think. You know, um, if they do, great. And if they do if this does end up working out, then perfect. But I agree. I don't think that this team is as flashy as they used to be, is as powerful as they used to be. I think they can be in the future. But as you said, I will also be taking the under for a very similar reason in that I just don't see this team being able to outperform the Phillies and the Mets, especially with the big question mark with the starting rotation.
Hey guys, sorry about that. My mic went out for a little bit, but we did finish where we wanted to get to. Tomorrow we are last day of power rankings for the 2023 MLB season. We're excited. Thank you for joining us on this power rankings journey. Tomorrow will be a bit on the longer side, so stick around for that. But opening day, we're excited. Jacob excited. Thank you for joining us on Let's Talk Baseball, and we will see you next time.